Good morning, everyone. Let me see if I've got everything I need. I do. My name is Candace Witt, and I'm a registered prayer practitioner with Light on the Mountains and Centers for Spiritual Living. Let's just close our eyes and go within. I recognize the presence of that divine source, that expression of creativity, that one, that all, right here, right now, in this space. And I know that it is at the center of my being, as I know that it is the center of each one of you. I just allow that center to fill my body, to fill every cell of my body, and connect me to everything that is, to each one of you, to all that there is. I know that it is the one source, the all, everything that is needed right now, right here. I give thanks for R.L. and Max and their music, for Reverend John and his message, for each one of you here, because you are what makes Light on the Mountains what it is. As together we say, and so it is. This is the first time in a very long while that, because of the problems that I have with my knee, I've not been able to easily go out and hike to see the amazing wildflowers that are in profusion on our slopes. I decided that this last week, pain or not, I needed to go out to Adams Gulch to see some of what has been blooming in profusion on our mountains. The short loop was probably all that I could manage, and with double walking poles, I started out. Usually, I'm walking briskly, smelling the clean, fresh air, but wanting to get somewhere, on a mission. Today was different. I was slower than I can ever remember being in my whole life. My steps were short, but I was determined. As I began putting one foot in front of the other, so slowly, I had time to look closely at everything I was passing. And what an amazing thing that was, to really have the time to see all of the small things, to see the tiny bluebells almost hidden by the surrounding plants, to be aware of the beautiful play of colors on the tree trunks, to see such differentiation of color all around me, to really being fully in the present moment. Everything looked brighter and clearer. I felt a great sense of euphoria. I wish that it hadn't taken this situation to force me to slow down. There are times when brisk exercise is exactly what I need, but I now know there are others when it's time to just really be present with what's around me, to smell the proverbial roses, or in this case, the pine trees. It makes me ponder all of the areas of life that will be helped by just slowing down, of experiencing each moment fully. What have I been missing in my often breakneck speed as I move through life? Where can I slow down and just be, savoring every moment? As I sit at the dining room table, I'm enchanted by the breeze blowing through the huge pine outside our window, watching the finches feeding at our bird feeder. I am so connected to this present moment. Thank you. I think it's time now for us to read our affirmation, which is on this insert. Let's do that together. I look within and set intentions through prayer and then step forward in action to help transform the world.
So let me tell you about my favorite fortune cookie. I actually saved this one. This is like 35 years ago. I know, when I saved it in my wallet for a while, I don't know why. Well, I'll tell you. So it said, "You will travel to a place where strange customs prevail." And of course, I was in my 20s, so that was like every weekend. So, but the funny thing about that, I saved it in my wallet because it was so unique, and I had lost that wallet at Venice Beach in California. And I got a call from someone who had found it. It says, "Well, I want to make sure that I'm giving it to the right person. Can you tell me what the fortune cookie says in your wallet?" So it got me back my wallet. Is that kind of funny? So welcome here, and hopefully you'll be coming later. A lot of people decided to come once today, and they are coming to the time when they can get a cheeseburger. We don't have cheeseburgers this morning, I just want you to know. But we will have them from 5 o'clock on, and I think people are positioning themselves to come and get cheeseburgers. And we will be having entertainment, bring your own lawn chair, and what's great about this is that we haven't done this in like 3 years for obvious reasons. And so it's very exciting that we are doing that again to launch to the summer. So, what a weird world we're living in. So my larger talk title for probably this decade is, we are here to recreate the world. And we can choose how we do that. And everything that we are seeing on the news and in the world is telling us that we can't change the world. But yet, we can. So today, and this is something I'm going to return to often, and I've been here before, is talk about how do we recreate our lives in the world, but really. That there is a saying in many new thought circles and metaphysics is that everything is always created twice. It's created on the level of consciousness well before you see it show up as a chair, or any one of you, or us, or a window, or an electrical outlet. That most of the creation happens in consciousness. But as humans, we act as if the opposite is true. We think that if we toss up a couple affirmations and light a candle and throw some salt over our shoulder, that we're good to go. And what we would like to see come into our life will just poof into existence. It's actually much more like an iceberg where the manifestation above the water is what you see, but there's so much below. So often when we don't see what we would like to see, we haven't given attention to what's below the water. In a sense, that's not the fun part. We want the good stuff. We want the UPS delivery. We want the thing to show up at our door. We want to meet the right people, have the right career, or whatever you think that it is. But in reality, where we need to put our focus is how we are recreating the world and our life in consciousness. And when we do that, there's some difficult things that we have to face first. That everything you see didn't happen by accident. That we all, on some level, participated in it coming forth. And I know that kind of smarts, because we would say, well, why? I don't want this. And even on the individual level, I don't want to have this thing happen to me, or a life-threatening disease, or financial difficulty. And we can, as humans, go into blame and shame of like, oh, well, that can't be. I would never consciously choose it. Well, that's the key word there. We would never consciously choose some of the mayhem that we experience, but we have on some level opened the door. And the only way that we can truly change it is to realize that we created what we have already. But that's the good news. If we created what we did and we own up to it, we can also understand that we can uncreate it and create something else new. So it's not like I take no responsibility what's here, but now I'm taking responsibility for the new stuff. It doesn't work that way. So I know it is a bitter pill to swallow a little bit, but again, if we go away from blame and shame and oh my, poor us, it actually is very freeing to say that, oh, as messed up as this is, we created it and we can do something different. It's a point of great power when you come to that point to realize that we can have a do-over, start-over if we're really, really intent and serious about it. So how did we get into this mess? Seems like another day on the news is another mess. Just when you think that we are kind of like, okay, I got used to the old mess, and you go, oh, it really is a bigger mess now. And of course, that puts us into all sorts of levels of disbelief of, oh, nothing can be done. So let's look at the two levels of how we create things. And to realize, as Kathy Ann Lewis, a colleague of mine, a quote that she has quoted often about this is that everything you see we have either created, we have promoted, or we have allowed it. And again, this smarts. I know, I'm getting all the uncomfortable stuff up first. I just want you to know, and I'll get to a better place. So we create it consciously, like I want to create this. We or promote it, or this already exists, so I will go with it, whether I like it or not. It's the only thing available, so I'll promote it and take it into my life, or I'll allow it, meaning I am so helpless and powerless, I just will stand on the sideline and just let the train go across the track here. So on some level, that's how the doors are opened, and even when we don't like them to be open, that's kind of how it happens. And again, it really smarts. And if you have anything in your life right now that is really troubling you, that is painful, that is keeping you up at night, to say that somehow you opened a door, it hurts. I just want you to know, it hurts. And again, it's so easy to go to that blame, shame sort of thing. What's wrong with me? Why don't I have a higher consciousness? Why am I more spiritual? It has nothing to do with that. So let's go back to the beginning. How do we create? One of the most powerful ways we create is as a group consciousness. We have a group agreement of how the world works. So if I were to take a poll here, I don't think anyone would be pro-war, pro-kids getting shot at schools, pro-people having their civil rights taken away. But we have contributed to a belief that there is a world where those things are inevitable. That's the reason they exist, because we don't like them, but we don't fully believe that a world is possible without those things right now. So it is the larger agreement that we have. Example that I have used often is that none of us believe in homelessness and hunger. Do we? Anyone pro-homelessness and hunger? I don't see any hands. Do you know that we have more than enough housing and food to feed everyone in the world that exists right now? It's not about growing more food. It's not actually about building more homes. There is enough right now, but we believe in our collective consciousness that you just don't give people food. You just don't give people a place to live. So we have enough, but we have a belief at how it gets distributed. So I'm not saying you just hand out free stuff. It's a very complicated belief system that we have more than enough, but not everyone shares in that somehow. And again, so just even look at your mind, what's going on. But wait a second. If I don't work with it, they shouldn't get it. Or, they chose that type of life. So all that stuff that we have that is folded into this belief system of why it's somehow okay that people are hungry and without homes. And so I'm not saying that we start a line, we just start handing out stuff, that we need to change our belief system from the ground up and look at a different way, a different model. And that's what creating a new world is. It's like having a different model that works for everyone. So in anything that you don't think that is working in the world or in your life, you have to ask yourself, well, what do I really believe about that? And how has that been affected by the collective consciousness that we have all been raised with? And of course, we just take those beliefs and ideas for granted. One of the most powerful things to do in your life, of course, is to travel and to go to different parts of the world, not just Western parts, because there is often a different collective consciousness of how things work. And that sometimes as loud Americans, we go, well, wait a second, why are you doing this? And I'm like, what's up with you? We do it this way. It's the agreement that they have there. So when we look at a collective consciousness and we say we want to change the world, we have to just admit that we want to change our agreement of how it works. And again, give no blame, no shame, oh, it's your fault, you did that, blah, 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 is say that, okay, let's put that aside. We can have a new agreement. How do we build it from the ground up? How do we create? How do we involve everyone? And so again, still, it seems like things that we don't want to happen have so much power right now, and part of our belief system is that we are powerless. And that who am I to make a difference? Well, of course, the real thing is, who are you not to make a difference? And it does start in consciousness. So again, notice we all go to manifestation. What can I do? Where can I go today? Can I stand on a street corner, on a box somewhere with a flag and say, that'll make a difference? Maybe it will. But it starts in consciousness, and to believe that you can make a difference in some way. It starts with, as we say, elevating your energy in your belief that something different can happen, and know that energetically, that even going to the market, you can be an emissary of a world that is different. That two people coming in contact always change each other on some level. So haven't you noticed that when you are in a bad mood, you put those seeds everywhere you go? And it's interesting how suddenly everyone you come to meet that day is in a bad mood. And guess what? You did it. Because you kind of came in with your little boo-boo face, and they're like, oh God, who's that? So you planted seeds of just nastiness all day because you were in that foul mood. And the opposite is true. When you are of a higher energy, and like maybe you just got a phone call like, oh my God, that great thing happened. You brought that energy everywhere you went, and isn't it a coincidence how wonderful everyone you met that day was? I mean, it was like magic how everyone it was like a magic carpet ride. Everyone was so nice and so willing to be helpful. That's because you brought that higher energy of how things could be into everywhere you went, unconsciously even. You were just on such a high because something great happened in your family that you couldn't help it like overflow and share it with everyone without even telling the story. It wasn't like you even, stopped the checker and said, my sister just had her first child or something. It's like, no, you didn't do that. You just exuded that positive energy of something amazing happened. So one of the first things that we do in changing the world is change ourselves and know that we are changing a greater consciousness everywhere we go, doing anything that we do. And yes, we may through that do things that seem more significant, like vote, talk to your Congress people and Senate people, make a statement with other people as groups as we raise our group energy, any number of those things, but it starts with a commitment of how are you going to show up every day in your life energetically. I know with so much happening over the world the last few years, I've had many people say, I can't turn on the news anymore, and all I want to do is stay in bed and put the cover over my head. You can do that for a day. I'll give it to you. Do it one day a week. Have a pitiful pearl party one day a week. Get it out of your system. It's too hot to put a blanket over your head this time of year anyway. Try it next January. And also, you don't have to watch the news 24 hours a day, but we have to be aware of what's going on. And to not take that as a way of lowering your sense of what's possible, but as saying that there is something even greater than that I'm going to be the emissary of. Because here's an interesting thing about energy and consciousness and intention. So as Ernest Holmes has written, that intentional thought is more powerful than unintentional thought. And take that next step further, positive intentional thought is far more powerful than negative intentional thought. So even someone or a group of people who are intent and have plans on causing mayhem in your community and the world, it may be successful to a certain point, but that type of energy ultimately is always doomed to fail and to collapse upon itself. It's like a paper tiger. It can't hold that form for an extended period of time, of years or say decades. It is just doomed to collapse upon itself. Positive intentional thought only grows. That as we get together with other people who have a similar belief and idea of what can exist in the world in our communities, that is just it's just throwing like kerosene on a fire in a good way. that it grows upon itself and takes a life of its own, that we find out that 2 plus 2 does not equal 4, it equals 5 and 6 and 10 as you bring that energy together to create a positive change in the world. So it starts with believing that you can, in spite of all the evidence that tells you otherwise. And I know it's really hard some days. They said, give yourself a weekly pity party. Ask friends, we're going to just have a terrible time today. You can imagine your friend calling you at your best friend, we're going to have a really terrible time today. Would you like to come over and talk about how bad it is? And I'll burn some appetizers for us and have way too sugary drinks, and we'll just go with it. Doesn't that sound like fun? But in a sense, we do that without realizing that, because we feed on this stuff and think, oh my God, it's so terrible, and it's just getting worse, and there's no way it can get better, and I've been protesting this stuff for 60 years, and here I am with the same sign I made 60 years ago. Whatever it takes is what it takes. So my belief is that we are at a time of great change in a positive way, and I believe that everything that needs to be seen to heal and transform is being brought to light. Have you ever lived in a really shoddy apartment like I have, and you turn on the light and the cockroaches come out and spread? I've lived in way too many of those many years ago. So we're kind of like in that situation like right now. The stuff that we knew was there, but like when I was living in those apartments, my dread was to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, because you turn on the light, it's like, and you can't really get back to sleep once you've seen that in the middle of the night. You really can't, because you're like, with your blanket up to your nose again. So you just don't want to do it. But you realize that at a certain point, you actually have to buy a roach motel. They are cheap and abundant and easily solved. So not that I'm comparing certain things through us buying roach motels, but in a sense, in consciousness, that's what we have to do. So we have to look at everything in our larger life and in our personal life of how we are creating, what we are basing that which we create upon. And it really does come to a binary system. And again, I don't want you to go, shame, blame alert. Just want you to know, shame, blame alert, let's not go there. So everything we create is some form of either love or some form of fear. Fear and love are both tricky. When we say fear, we think kind of haunted house, people running away from the monster fear. Shaking in my boots, a train is hitting me and I'm paralyzed and can't move kind of fear. Fear is far more clever than that. So let's not even call it fear. Let's call it anxiety. Let's call it a belief that something can't happen that I want to happen. Let's just say that when we are creating from that level, we are creating for what we might call our smaller ego self, in a sense. So here's my nice little thing as why everyone at home can hear me. But this is kind of like our smaller ego self, because it runs on a battery. And if I remove this battery, it won't work anymore. It doesn't connect to anything else. It is limited in what it can do based on my putting this limited battery within this. Now, if I would plug it into the wall, which would be annoying, it would be connected to something much larger, and you could see how it would be much less likely for it to fail. Often, the way that we create in our personal life, we create like this. I have limited ability to work. That I can't go anywhere until there's an auto deposit from my employer. And I'm waiting. I keep refreshing the screen. Is it coming? Is it coming? Is it coming? I can't go until it comes here. That on so many things, we are told that you can't do something until you have something that tells you that you can. And this is like here. This works today because the battery works. So it tells me I can use it today. But if it suddenly didn't work, rather than run back to the kitchen, get another battery, I'd probably just take it off. This isn't working. I can't use it anymore. It's limited. It's of no good, no use to me right now. So much of what we create, whether we are willing to recognize it or not, can be from that smaller ego self where the answer is more no, maybe, not likely. That we want to, in a sense, Seeing is believing as opposed to believing is seeing. And yes, we live in a physical world, but we overinvest in it. That our ego self needs a certain type of proof that actually isn't needed. So here's something that I have found in creating in my life. Not only my life, and as I view other things. So imagine anything you said you wanted to do. I know, maybe big or small. Let's go to dinner with friends. Let's go on a trip. Time to replace the new car. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Do I have enough money? Now, money is important. I wouldn't suggest going to the restaurant without money and thinking you're going to get them. It just doesn't work that way. But I have also found in consciously creating in my life that, especially with money, it seems to be the last thing that shows up in the process of manifestation for me. Meaning that there is so much planning that needs to happen first, and when I'm actually ready to put it into motion and think, oh, we need money, the money has a way of showing up. Whereas often as human beings, we won't even begin planning in consciousness until we see the money. Have you noticed that? Well, I can't even start to think about that trip or my kid going to college until I somehow figure out how to get all this pile of money. But investing in consciousness in a way that you know absolutely that it is possible has a way of drawing to it that which is needed. The people, the funding, the right situation. And it's not weird or woo-woo, it's just kind of how the thing works. That intention of knowing that I feel called to do this. This isn't just some silly thing that, why not? My neighbor's doing it. That you feel in consciousness this is for you to do, and you invest in consciousness, you grow it in consciousness, and as you are growing and investing in consciousness, then it is interesting how you start to see the physical manifestation come forth to support that. It always works that way. In fact, though, if you jump the gun to the physical manifestation, we've all done that. It collapses sometimes. Have you noticed that? Oh, I've got to have this thing. Doesn't make sense. Even your friends are like, really? And you might have it for 10 minutes because you didn't grow the consciousness to keep it or to grow it or for it to be a healthy or healthful addition to your life. So everything is created twice, and most of the creation is in consciousness. And again, we forget that. So when we create from not our lower ego self, but in a sense what we might call our higher divine self, that is always focused on consciousness and trusting that the manifestation will, in a sense, take care of itself. I mean, not completely. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do things in the world. I don't want you to think that. It's not like dialing for dollars or something, that it just shows up. But you seem to get what I call on the escalator right of consciousness, meaning, boy, this is just kind of flowing. And yes, it's challenging, and I really had to dig deep of finding the resources within myself, but there seems to be a flow to this nonetheless. And that is what creating in consciousness first leads you to do. And here's the really good news. So when you are creating from that higher divine self, in other words, elevating your energetic way of creation, you cannot feel a sense of fear or lower self at all. You just can't. It's just like if you turn the lights on the room, there is no sense of darkness. Darkness cannot exist in the presence of a bright room. Have you noticed that? It's like you're in a dark room. What will I ever do? Turn on the light. I mean, that's pretty simple. So in consciousness, when we are stuck in our poor me's ego self, it's time to turn on the light. And I know sometimes we can get so stuck in that, like, this is too big, too long, I can't even imagine how to heal this. But challenging ourselves to go to that higher place where things are always possible will take care of that. And that's what's called for in the world right now. Again, there is so much evidence of this being such a hot mess, we should just blow it up and start all over again. But, again, it's just those little creatures that come when the light gets turned on. I would rather see what needs to be healed rather than to have it hiding under my couch. I don't know about you. So we get to see it, and we get to grow in consciousness. So here is a couple go-to things that I'm going to leave you with today. As always, what do I do? It starts with, I know you're going to hate this, spiritual practice. Oh, I can't meditate. Now notice any negatives that came into your mind. I can't pray. I can't meditate. I try to be quiet, and the first thing that happens, I'm hearing like brass bands in my brain. And you know what? That is a really effective affirmation. When you say that enough, you will only hear brass bands in your brain when you close your eyes and try to be quiet. See how powerful affirmations are? I mean, it has served you for a lifetime. So let's consider something else. What if you just had an ongoing spiritual practice, because actually there's no separation from what we think is real life and spiritual practice. Everything you do, everything you say is spiritual practice. The choice is that going to be from this self or the other self? Or are you going to affirm something that is going to bless your life and move it forward in the life of the world? Or are you going to do affirmations that hold you back and keep you stuck in poor me mode? It's pretty simple. Absolutely cultivate the belief that there is a divine essence that is within you that is connected to all things. And that it is like the internet. Everything is available to you. Everything. Any piece of information, any possibility, you are plugged in. And that, as a beginning, is all you need to do. Rather than invest in the idea that you are disconnected and nothing is possible to move you or the world forward, to just entertain the idea, the belief that you are truly connected in a greater consciousness, and that you are going to use just that belief to just affirm that you are in a higher elevated existence, and that you are going to share that belief unconsciously wherever you go. That's where you start. You don't start with flag waving on the corner. You might get there. But you start with that you make this your mission in life to know that you are connected to a divine source that will never lead you astray or wrong. Start there. If you are in a difficult situation, who knows? If you're from California or if you're in the DMV, that's my favorite low energy place to be. If so anyone from California, you know what I'm talking about. In fact, I think there's a part of me that's still there. You never get to leave. What's that, Hotel California, that old song? You never get to leave. There's a part of consciousness that will always be there, I promise you. Where was I going with this? So even in a place like that, to decide, I'm in this terrible place where everyone's angry and upset, I'm going to bring a different idea. It may not make my line get any shorter, but I'm going to know that the presence of the divine is right where I am, and I'm going to elevate my idea of what is possible. And actually, if I'm here for 3 hours, that is a great opportunity to spread the idea and energy of possibility like radiating in the DMV. Boy, is there a place that it is not needed more. Could you imagine suddenly if even 10 people at the DMV decided that they were going to radiate a higher consciousness and the belief in greater possibility? Do you think the people behind the counter might actually not stop scowling at you? Maybe. It might. But just imagine how that could have a chain reaction of like, I really don't want to be here, but not so bad after all. There was a nice person next to me, and I was kind of looking for a job, and they said they actually had a job. You know, it's just interesting what can happen when you, rather than affirming this is a terrible place to be and like an eternal hell that I will never leave, again, the DMV, that you believe otherwise. So in spiritual practice, rather than coming up with a mantra or the right prayer cushion or the right gongs and the right candles, that this is all you need to do. Just know that you are going to show up in great faith and the feeling of possibility, and that you are going to consciously raise your belief and energy in any situation that you are, especially in the ones that are really effective in like taking the air out of your tires. That's mostly what you need to do. I mean, there's like books and books on spiritual practice, and it really gets down to that. To make a conscious decision to show up and think differently in situations that appear to be terrible. That's it. With the terrible things that we see on the news and happening in the country and the world, to say that I energetically take a stand for something else, and I'm being attracted to people who can come together to know something different. That's all spiritual practice is. That's all that's needed right now. That's it. Because all that crazy stuff we see on the news, they're energetically not that well organized. They may think, let's cause mayhem on some level. But again, positive intentional thought is much more powerful than negative intentional thought. And even just think that again, if you're like, oh, this is terrible. Positive intentional thought is more powerful than what I am experiencing and seeing before me right now. If you're seeing something, another shocker on the news, positive intentional thought is more powerful than negative intentional thought, and I join in consciousness with those who are in agreement, or who even want to be in agreement, who feel that they might not be able to. That's how you bring other people up with you that are thinking, I just don't think I can do it on my own. We can't do it on our own. It's a joint consciousness. Anything you do, anything that we want to do here in our spiritual community, anything in the larger community of Wood River Valley, the country and beyond, takes a belief that there is a positive intentional energy and consciousness that we can get on board with. And yes, there's days that we all have trouble with that. So I like the library borrow book system of energy. So a colleague of mine brought this to my attention like decades ago. He says, I was with a minister friend of mine. I wasn't a minister yet, and my life was in mayhem. And she said, you're in a really bad place right now. I'm going to let you borrow my belief for a while. Like, what? I'm hearing, oh, poor me, and you're throwing me a lifeline? He says, this was great. He says, don't even pray this week. I'm going to do it for you. So, I want us all to also be on the energy borrowing system. If you're having a low day, you don't even necessarily have to call me up or anyone else. Know that there is someone else here who is in a higher energy level that I can unconsciously connect with to rise me up. That person or people exist. That I'm going to consciously disconnect me from my kind of oh poor me place that I'm right now. And no, just even kind of make a pact in this room. Envision, as we have coffee and stuff, and memorize some of these faces. If you're having a low day, now, oh, there's someone that I can energetically borrow from in the future, and vice versa. And I do the same thing. Do you think every day I just think it's all going to work out? There's some days that I want to put the cover up to my, like up here, and I consciously know that there are people who are knowers in my life that in consciousness I borrow from that. It is always available. Energy can never be destroyed. It can only be redistributed. Sometimes we need help with it to be redistributed. So on those days that you can't do it, know that in consciousness, even again, memorize the faces in these rooms. We will all do it for each other. I think, can we agree on that? That in consciousness, we can bring anyone's face to mind in here and say, oh, I didn't even meet them. I didn't have coffee with them, but they were there. So energetically connect with them, and that we will, in a sense, be on the energy borrowing system with each other. And doing that, it just expands, and it expands, and it expands. And of course, the last thing we think, why am I living in this crazy time in the world? Guess what? You chose it. You signed up. You got first in line, actually, and said, this sounds fun. Let's recreate the world. I know, it looks like it's going to blow up, but it would be kind of fun to go down and play with this for a while. We all said that. Here we are. It's the main event. We were the last few decades just kind of working up to this, like kind of, doing some drills, getting ready for it. Here we are. it's showtime, as they say, and here we are. And so I think we're ready. And it's not going to change just tomorrow. It will be gradual change as we shift and expand our consciousness, and that's why we're here. So I'm done. Let's pray. So let us know that the presence, our higher self of the divine, is right here within us, within this room, within this community, within our country and the world. And we know that that positive, intentional belief and thought is the truth of who we are. And we allow ourselves to live and abide and magnify that presence of who we are. We take it with us wherever we go. We make it who we are, and we are an emissary of it. We no longer allow ourselves to be brought down by a smaller ego self. It is not the truth of who we are. And we connect with all that is positive and intentionally good to continually rise ourselves up and to change our world, simply. And we give great thanks in this. We know that in spite of appearances, it is inevitable for positive change to take place. And so there's nothing more for us to do than to give gratitude and thanks up front without seeing the full effect of the work that we're doing. We know it's a done deal. So we say thanks, and we, in a sense, let it go and know that this will play out the way that it needs to play out, but we do our part and let it be. And so it is.